It's the best week of the year. It's the end of the legislative session. And by popular demand, we have our annual end of session preview with our good friend Steve Greenhut. Join us next on Next Round. Welcome to the Pacific Research Institute Next Round podcast. I'm Tim Anaya, PRI's Vice President of Marketing and Communications, and with us, as always, is our good friend, PRI's Communication Director, Matt Fleming. Matt, how are you?
Good, Tim. How are you?
I see the extra smile on your face because, like me, you are counting down the hours until your legislature is out of business for the year. We always say you can rest easy.
A couple months would do no harm.
That's right. You can take your hand off your wallet. That lawmakers aren't there to figure out ways to tax or spend more. And with us, it's kind of our annual tradition. I think this is the 8th or 9th time we have done this, but we always like to, for our end of session preview, bring our old friend Steven Greenhut, who's the director of PRI's Free Cities Center, and he's with the R Street Institute. He's a columnist for the Southern California News Group newspapers, and I can't think of anybody better to join us to talk about the soon-to-be session that was. Steve, welcome back.
Oh, thanks. Yep.
Well, as you can see, Steve is ready to start the barbecue with the legislature gone, because that's the best part we know as staff. As soon as they're gone for the year, you are throwing your coat and tie away for at least 3 or 4 months.
That's true, although in an election year for Republican staff, it would mean you're about to spend weeks in Tulare or Porterville or
Lancaster. Beautiful
Modesto.
parts of the state. Well, we are not going to make you follow us along on that trek. We're instead going to talk about some of the hot issues in the last week of session, give you kind of a preview of what's up and where we think things are heading on these issues. And we're going to start with, well, it's the issue that everybody's talking about, right? It's AI/data centers. We talked last week about what Steve Hilton and Javier Becerra had to say about how they might envision things as governor on these issues. Well, we still have a governor in the chair, and he's kind of, well, charitably all over the map on these issues. Last year, he vetoed a bill that would require data centers to disclose their water use before applying for a permit. But he signed a narrower bill that would require state regulators to study. And we know whenever you can't figure out what you want to do on a bill, get a study bill. Then you can say you've done something, but you really haven't. And so it would require regulators to study whether data center demand is quietly raising everyone else's electric bill, which is sort of an interesting study. And I don't know how to predict the outcome of that study. But so there's a couple of bills up this session that might get some interest in our end of session period. Steve, you've been kind of taking a look at these issues. Where do you think we are on AI and data centers at the end of session? Do you think any of the bills that have been floated around are going to go anywhere? Where do you think we're headed next session?
Yeah, I mean, the whole AI issue, I mean, economically speaking, it's a big deal for the state. There's, it's such a, LAO often points to our dependence on the state economy on the AI industry booming. In fact, if we look at the housing markets across the country are kind of softening, but my daughter's looking for a house in the Bay Area, and it's absolute nuts. And a lot of, I read one article that was talked about, the AI boom is the reason for the just overheated housing market. So it's a big deal for the economy. And yet we also, the progressives in the legislature, and some conservatives too, this whole data center issue is causing consternation, and it's not just here. I mean, in Texas and all across the country, and
Wisconsin, the Republican candidate for governor, is making a big issue going after the Democrat on his support of data centers.
Yeah, because like I was looking at polls, it's like 70% of the public are fearful of them, or however the questions are worded. I mean, I kind of get it if they're going to build one, 20 feet from your neighborhood, and it's going to. But this whole stuff, like you mentioned, the water, they use a minimal amount of water. I mean, the answer to that is, I don't know. This is radical. Why don't we build more water resources? We could do that. So on the
why don't we have a water policy of abundance?
Of abundance, there's
yes.
a must-read book.
Yes.
So, but there are two big bills that are going forward. I checked today. They'll probably pass, right? Senate Bill 886, and it instructs the California Public Utilities Commission to tell utilities that they cannot increase the costs of other ratepayers. So any new data center cannot impose new costs, and the data centers have to pay a whole bunch of their share of the different environmental stuff and other things, electric generation. Now we're not building in California the kind of number of data centers as in other states. We probably should be. There have been a few proposals in the Bay Area for obvious reasons. So it's kind of, for Newsom, he's going to have to walk a fine line here. The utility companies, the Chamber of Commerce, they're against these bills because more rigid regulations will impose new costs. But the irony is they're really not, at least according to one report I saw recently, they're really not increasing the cost of other people's utilities bills. It's quite the opposite. Like PG&E argues, they spread the costs of the stranded costs of the utility infrastructure among a larger base, and the utility companies have had this death spiral issue where the more people move to solar, the higher costs get because it has to be spread along a smaller base. So it actually can increase, the base cost, the spreading of the base cost. So that's I think it's all just theater more than anything else, and it would force these companies to enter into long-term contracts, and that's a problem, right? Even utility companies need the flexibility. We don't know how this whole AI industry is going to grow. And it's just more of that inflexibility we see. And I don't know. This strikes me as one that Newsom might actually veto. And then there's SB 887, the companion bill that would provide CEQA exemptions for constructing these facilities, data centers, provided that in 5 years, 100% of their energy will be renewables and 75% on the first year. So who's going to take advantage of that? It's probably a nothing burger bill. So I don't know. I think these feel like things that the governor might, the tech side of the governor versus the progressive side of the governor, maybe the tech side will win out on that. What do you think?
Well, our Bartlett Cleland has a very interesting column up on our Right by the Bay blog, and he kind of frames it like this. He says, whoever becomes governor is going to inherit an AI mess, and he challenges whoever wins this fall must manage better. So Matt, as you look at kind of what the legislature is doing here at the end of session, where we might be headed, are they doing any better of a job of managing what really is becoming an AI mess?
I don't really think so. Look, there are real concerns over AI in society. This data center issue, we talked about it last week. It's a grid issue. We are already headed towards a energy cliff. The state is doing almost nothing to build out the grid and provide more energy.
Right. What's our favorite stat? We're going to be 21% short of the power we need to run the grid every day just from the 100% electric car requirements.
Yeah, so they can come up with these weird legislative fixes that Steve just mentioned. that can disincentivize data centers from being in California. They can raise rates on them if they want, but at the end of the day, there's just not enough power to go around. And it is one thing when this is happening in Ohio or Michigan or somewhere like that, but this is literally the home. This is like our core industry. This is our core industry. They will brag about the size of California's economy, which is basically propped up by like NVIDIA, which
Right.
they have a little bit of vested interest in this, and a couple other tech companies. But at the same time, they do everything they can to make it as unhospitable as possible. And I don't know what the solution is to all the data centers, but I can say that regardless of whether or not they want to have these in California, we still have an energy grid problem. And if their biggest issue is that it's raising up rates on other people, build out the grid.
Right. That's the answer. Is build. It's like with everything. Build the infrastructure needed to serve a growing economy.
Yeah. And if you want to have it be on all renewables and all this stuff, we need a grid that supports that.
Well, right. And we saw with we have the highest take rate for electric vehicles. It's like one out of 4, which is pretty significant. But then you have Cal ISO issuing their notice to not charge your car batteries.
Yes.
And then the legislature passes laws that incentivize more electricity use, and yet they don't want to build. A part of it, is the regulated utility model, right, which is problematic, but that's just a way of life. But they need to build more electricity power.
That's right.
Same is true for the water argument. I
Yeah.
mean, again, if only there was a way to collect rain and save it for future use.
It's really strange that way. Or have the members of your own coastal commission, not referring to any specific governors such as Gavin Newsom,
Yes.
approve a private project to desalinate water that would
Right.
meet 10% of the needs of a 3 million plus county.
Yeah, if
Or-
only
or
California.
someone had thought of that.
If only California were near just this vast body of water.
Right.
That's
Right.
just amazing.
It's just amazing.
Well, let's look at another issue that was a bigger issue in 2025, but it still is a big issue overall, and that's housing. Probably Steve's favorite issue to write
like it.
about. If you want to see some entertainment on social media, look at Steve going back and forth with the YIMBY activists on social media. It's great entertainment on a Sunday afternoon, but
And I agree with them on a
and
lot
you
of
agree
things.
with them, right? So, obviously we have the ballot measure that is kind of overshadowing everything on SEQA reform, and, who knows where things will go on that measure. There's certainly a lot of sort of Sacramento institutional support and money behind that measure. This year, it seems like most of the work on housing was done outside the legislature, except kind of one big bill that Buffy Wicks, who is the assembly member from the East Bay, who seems to have found the secret sauce of how to get housing legislation
She's
through
great
the
on housing
legislature.
bills.
Yeah. She and her colleague Sharon Quirk Silva had a bill that would have tried to streamline the production of townhomes in the state. But one of the ways they were doing it right is having a kind of, I don't know what it would be, a special minimum wage or a special wage for the workers who would be building those projects, and the building and construction trade, who on the one hand likes building things, but on the other hand they like CEQA because it preserves their power to do things. They nearly sank the bill, and they were actually forced to drop that provision of the bill. And if you think about it, it's kind of a smart needle, threading the needle to try to figure out, because it's as much the labor side of it as it is the regulatory side of it. Steve, where are we headed with that bill, and what do you see ahead for the legislature on this? If we have a big defeat for this SEQA reform measure this year, what's that going to do for the momentum that we've seen in the last few years here in the Capitol?
Can I ask you a question before you get into that?
Yeah.
And this is coming from my East Coast upbringing, where townhomes are everywhere. I grew up in one, and here they don't have them. They have row homes in San Francisco, which are awesome.
Right.
And I think there's a minor distinction between a row home and a townhome. I think it has to do with who owns the common areas. Setting that all aside, is there like a specific reason why townhomes are either not favored in California or somehow
Yes.
prohibited?
But-
Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, yes.
Weave it
yes.
into your answer.
I will get.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, okay, short answer, then I'll get to Tim.
Yeah.
Construction defects litigation has the way our legal codes are written to allow for construction defects legislation has disincentivized the construction of any sort of attached housing when you can build. So you'll see some of these neighborhoods, like I was in the Bay Area over the weekend, and where the houses are like.
Yeah. By my kids' daycare, it's like that. They have
Yeah.
big houses and they're this far apart.
How do you paint in between this one as a property? I'm so old, we called them row houses. Townhouses was, I grew up in the East Coast too, and they had townhouse that's like just the suburban, snooty version of it. We grew up
That's
in
what we call them in Springfield. Townhomes.
brick row houses. But yes, so Quirk Silva bill, loved that bill. In fact, I had pitched a bill in one of my other capacities that would have done the same thing, but for single family residences under, I think it was like 1,700 square feet. And it's the same, but this is the same idea except for townhomes. So those are good bills. I think they'll pass. Limon, what is her title?
Senate Pro Tem.
Senate Pro Tem, right?
Monique Limon from
Right.
Santa Barbara.
Yes, she is kind of more of a NIMBY.
Yes.
And so
Didn't she have an interesting bill about some project in her
that's very
district?
Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Right, to stop a project in specifically in her district. So it's kind of, I've been trying to watch to gather how bad she's been on these issues. But I think that one will pass. I think that one should go into law. Getting back to your point, there's Assembly Bill 1903, construction defect reform. And it requires like some pre-litigation efforts before you can sue, so you get a chance to fix first. And you need to prove actual damage. I remember doing some stories for the newspaper about these construction defects lawsuits. And there was one project, it was being, one of the lawsuit points was an exterior stairwell, crumbling exterior stairwell. Well, it had no exterior stairwell. So they just used this punch sheet of pre-programmed lawsuits, and they send to everyone. And anyway, so that is actually an interesting thing. The other one, there's one that would streamline high-rises in big city downtowns. So that's not it's really hard to build them also. But what we're seeing is not a lot of bills this year. And we have seen quite a few, like Senate Bill 79, which allow the mid-rises near transit centers. That's having some impact. We're seeing a lot of SB 79 projects in San Jose, but there aren't a lot of bills this year. And part of it is they've kind of accomplished everything they've wanted. The YIMBY people, everything they want to accomplish on the permitting and the CEQA reform side. And I think there's a lot more to do. They need to get into the market rate housing side. But, that whole movement is so mixed. So many of the people just can't stand the idea of people getting in a car and driving any sort of sprawl-inducing development. So now they're moving more into financial things, dealing with technicalities, dealing with revolving loan funds. But they still need to get off of the idea that governments are the source of the construction. They are right about needing more construction, and a lot of the bills they've passed have been good ones. SB 9, in fact, we at the Free City Center, you and I went and did a video in Sacramento of a woman who built a SB 9 duplex, not duplex, ADU on her property.
Highly recommend to our viewers and our listeners, check out our latest tour. It was, I think it breaks a lot of myths when you watch it and you see it's not cheaper, we learn, but you can do it.
Right. She said that without the SB 9 reforms, it would have been far more expensive. So there are things going, but YIMBY Law, which is a public interest law group that handles YIMBY issues, did a study that said a lot of these laws have not led to the amount of new building that we like. So there's a lot more that needs to be done. Of course, we're all going to agree here that a lot of that needs to be done through markets. But you pointed, and then the other thing you touched on was the California Chamber of Commerce, Business Roundtable, CEQA reform, really broad, the broadest CEQA reform that we've seen yet. But it applies to a lot of things other than housing. And the YIMBY movement and the pro-housing movement they're split on it because they also see that will make it easier to build roads and highways and
How dare we?
right, and non-housing projects. So there, it's mixed in that area. So it'll be interesting to see.
Matt, where are we headed on housing?
In preparation for this, I was reading about the townhome bill, and I think Steve kind of mentioned this, but like, just trying to understand even what the issue is. It's like one union is fighting with another union over what wages to charge to build homes that apparently are prohibitive to build because of side litigation issues. And it's like, and then they're just like picking on townhomes, of course, because let's just focus on one form of housing. And to me, it's like why I vote against so many ballot measures. It's like it's just unnecessarily complicated. If someone owns land, and I can live with some zoning, right? I think cities can have a little bit of like internal planning. Whether you can't build a 400 unit apartment building next to a 1-lane road. There has to be like some infrastructure in place, that kind of stuff. So I'm with some sensible planning, but like if someone owns the land and they want to develop it, they can just go and develop it. I don't understand, like a union that doesn't necessarily even need to be involved to begin with is somehow deciding whether we can build townhomes statewide. I'm like, look, if people want to use union labor, that's fine. Union labor is good labor, but like the whole thing is unnecessarily complicated. It's a bunch of groups, the government included, inserting themselves into a process they don't need to be in, and it's like, just let the markets figure this out.
Well, let's talk about some more sausage making, but a different variety of sausage making. Though related here, it is the governor has released his long-awaited wildfire plan. And what's interesting on it is, and Steve, we know you've been following it, so I'll let you, give a 30,000-foot view of what he's trying to do. But what's interesting here is that unlike on this housing bill and these ongoing battles where you have a lot of different interests at each other's throat, on this one it seems like traditional foes are joining together to say, we don't really care for some of the provisions of the governor's plan, especially as it relates to utilities and utility liabilities. So give us an overview of what the governor's been kicking around, and do we really think lawmakers are going to go along with this, in the last week of a legislative session of an 8-year governorship?
Right, and we have a new Free Cities piece coming this week about the whole issue of liability and who gets to pay when there are wildfires, who pays. Right. And I'm by no means it's so complicated that, but essentially our state, what we use inverse condemnation, which makes it easy for homeowners to sue utilities for fires caused by their utility lines.
And some of these recent big wildfires were caused by utilities.
Absolutely, they have a malfunction equipment and arcing whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. But it's why we have the public safety power shutoffs now, because they don't want to take the liability risk.
Yeah, so I think the long-term solution is probably undergrounding a lot of those wires. It can't always be done, and it's not always cost-effective, but there are other more technological, and I'm no expert on this at all, there's some different technological, new technologies that are less prone to cause communities to burn down. But the question right now is who pays for it, and Newsom seems to be siding with the utilities. And, no, people don't like the regulated utilities in general any more than they like insurance companies, which I know we'll get to.
They don't do themselves any favors, and they're always, I remember going back years, the least little thing affecting the utility, they go around and say, we're going to have to declare bankruptcy. We're not going to, we can't handle that. Well, we've had a lot of bankruptcy causing issues in the past 2 decades, and they're still around.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, Southern California Edison, did they go bankrupt? And then PG&E went bankrupt. Was it twice? Maybe
twice, I think. Yeah.
Maybe SC&E didn't.
I don't think
they just
did.
mentioned that they might.
Yeah.
So
They all threaten it.
yes, it's a really difficult issue to figure out how to assess the liability, because if you assess the liability on utility companies, the way they're paid, they get to pass that on to the taxpayer. I mean, the ratepayers, who also are the taxpayers. But we also don't want to drive the utilities into bankruptcy. And I'm not sure, why do you think Newsom entered that fray? It doesn't seem like something you would want to enter at this state in his career.
I don't know. Matt certainly.
I think it's the revolving door.
I think it could be. I think it's this. I think he's got to have a cherry on top. I solved every problem in California during my governorship, and I think he thought that was a realistic way we could go forward. And I'm sure he's worked on green mandates and things with a lot of these utilities, and so he had some people who could scratch one another's backs on this sort of thing. So I could see that he would be. I don't know what kind of relationship we had with PG&E in particular when he was mayor, but I think it's just that. I think he, at least rhetorically, wants to say, I solved the problem, or I had the plan to solve the problem, and these folks didn't go along with me.
Any plan he has, any solution he has, really only has to show promise for 2 years.
Right.
And then after he's elected or not elected, it doesn't really matter.
Right. I think it's a talking point more than anything else. But the ambitiousness of nothing happens in the last year of an 8-year governorship. It's certainly not a brand new plan. And so the idea that, we're all kind of taking this as a serious proposal that they're just going to push right through, I think that's going to be a big issue potentially in the governor's race.
And that issue's been percolating for years.
Years.
I mean, and part of it comes down to that whole investment.
And he's been silent, or really it's in the background. His leadership has been in the background on that issue.
But if only the state could make an effort to mitigate wildfires.
Yes.
Like Smokey the Bear, you can prevent forest fires.
No, I mean, you are touching on one of the issues is, Newsom had talked about all these wildfire clearing, brushland clearing efforts to battle wildfires, and then it turned out there was it an NPR report or some report showing
Scott
that
Rod, it was amazing.
He kind of overstated how much land clearance they've done.
By a lot.
And another PRI board member, Dan Kolke, has written a chapter in our Saving California book from,
2021?
Yeah, and it was a chapter on some of the things that can be done.
You can still get a copy of it. Check it out on Amazon or your favorite bookseller.
Yeah, well, what are the things we could, I don't know, here's some innovative ideas. Use money from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to fund these projects that reduce wildfires. I mean, it seems like, as Matt says, there are a lot of things the state could do to make ourselves more resilient rather than just blaming climate change and figuring out who's going to pay after, half LA County burns down.
Because who's going to pay is a real issue, and I don't know that I have a great answer to that. You could even
You're
say,
going to pay, Matt.
like, even if it's the case of arson, right? Like, you can say, okay, well, we make the arsonist pay for it, but it's unfeasible.
Well, it's the issues of strict liability. Our state does impose strict liability on the utilities, and there are complex legal issues on how that should be arranged.
But also, like, it's unfeasible to say that, or infeasible, whichever one it is, that PG&E is going to always pay the cost for all of these things. Because they just don't have the money. Like, it's going to go out of business if you do that, right? So there is a complex answer here, and I don't necessarily know what it is, but I do know that you could at least start by making things better by mitigating the damage to begin with, so that the check is not as big as it is
I
now.
know the answer, and at the end of the day, whatever they do, we will be paying more in whatever
it's gonna be-
form
yes.
that it will be. We got to move on because we have a
Yep.
couple of more issues that I want to get to before it's our panelist choice. So it seems like the highest profile issue. You look online, you read the paper. It's this, I think, ironically named AB 1776, and I don't know who thought let's update antitrust monopoly laws was at the top of the agenda, but I'm sure this is probably a trial lawyer's dream come true to have this sort of thing. So Assemblymember Cecilia Aguiar-Curry, the Assembly Majority Leader, has been pushing this bill, and basically right now you have to have two businesses under state law to have this. There's an old law, it's called the Cartwright Law. Now you know an answer to a good Jeopardy question for tonight. This bill would say you could apply it to a single business and you would have a private right of action. So you, as a trial lawyer, or you as, you know, the squeeze-in guy, or whatever, you could sue these these businesses as individuals. It's been hugely divisive. She was forced to take amendments in the Senate to remove the private right of action, but there's a lot of time left for more changes and more twists and turns on that bill. Steve, where do you see this bill heading in the final week of the session? Do you think it's going to pass at the end of the day, even with these amendments?
I mean, I would guess that. I don't have any insider knowledge on that, but I would
Yeah.
think that it will, because with the private right of action taken out, now it's just up to public prosecutors. But the fact that AB 1776, yeah, the name is just great. The Compete Act, and you're letting people sue by just claiming a company has harmed competition, and companies with like less than 20% market share would be considered a monopoly. I mean, it's just crazy. And basically, any business that unreasonably restrains trade, how do you determine? Everything's going to end up in court, right? I mean, if you expand your business,
That's the goal if you're
right,
carrying the water
if you're,
for trial lawyers.
that's
right?
true. But it's not a great goal if you're in the business community.
Right.
But if you expand, your business operations, and I don't know, through succeeding and
Yes.
doing better, and you get more market share, that's, I guess, could be unreasonable. And in the legislature's view of what a monopoly is, that means you're creating a monopoly. As you point out, underwrites the Cartwright Act, which was already stricter than federal law, and so it kind of guts federal law, and it's a big difference if you're applying to two or more companies. Then there's some sort of element of potential collusion. But if you're just doing it in one company,
Do you monopolize yourself?
yeah. I mean, it's just But the stripping it away is basically it takes away the heinousness of it. It's still a bad idea, and if they pass it, maybe they'll add that back in at another session, right?
I've seen it happen many a time. Matt, I was more curious, how did they get AB 1776? Because when you introduce a bill, it's just the next number. I know they would always say there was a way you could reserve a bill number if it meant something. I never did that or know how you could do that. I'm guessing the majority leader could.
I'm saying she's the majority leader. That's my
could
guess.
reserve a bill number. But where do you think Newsom comes down on this? Because this seems like the kind of thing that, well, he probably wants trial lawyer support running for president, but that's a pretty bad bill, especially when he says, I'm a small businessman. Where do you think he comes down on this in the end, should it get to his desk?
He's hard to predict, but I think he'll probably veto it. I think it's too much. I think it's too much of a change. I think he wants to preserve his small business thing. The trial attorneys might be mad at him, but he's given them so much already that it's like.
I believe the Department of Finance did come out against the bill, which is a rare thing. They usually don't have a position on the bill. So that's a tea leaf that he might be going to veto the bill.
And policy-wise, I don't really have anything to add to what Steve said. Philosophically, I do have one point to make. Like, these are people who constantly are making things less competitive. They're constantly benefiting special interests. Occupational licensing, all these things are ways, whether they're doing it explicitly or it just is sort of what happens, they're constantly limiting competition. They have no problems if they're the ones monopolizing any number of things. They want to socialize all this stuff. I mean, that's a monopoly. Right. So I just philosophically, it's so weird. Sometimes I think this with a lot of bills, but sometimes I look at these bills and I just think, this person is so unqualified to be doing this. It's like when Matt Haney, who was like a education guy or something, wanted to create a state bank. It's like, you're so unqualified to do this.
We should have to look at his checking account first.
Right. But seriously,
see if he can even balance it.
It's like, it's so crazy to me. Like sometimes, like this is just, you just stay in your lane, please.
Stay in your lane. That would be a good. If I were an assembly member, I might have you. Knit me a pillow with "stay in your lane" on my couch.
Because this is 100% not something that came from the lawmakers' idea. Like sometimes they come with some industry background, or because they've been on a committee for so long, they have an idea.
Isn't she a farmer? I mean, where
she's
do you
a
come
farmer
up with this?
from like the North Sea, from the area.
Yeah.
This is something 100% that came from a special interest group with very smart lawyers who are trying to rig something so that they can make more money.
There's so many bills, we can't talk about every one of them, but one that really is an offensive bill. And our goal today was to rile Steve up on as many issues as possible.
Look at him, he's like reshuffling things.
He's ready. He knows what it's going to be. And this is a bill, Assembly Bill 1383, which it's an abomination, this
I
bill.
need heart pills when
you
it's
need heart
talk
pills,
about
right?
it.
Now, we went through, we have an incredibly underfunded pension system. Our Wayne Weingarten's done the work. At one point, we found it was $1 trillion underfunded if you use a more honest accounting measure.
But they did have a good year, though, right?
They did have a good year. Some say it was like in the $300-ish billion range. Either way, we can't afford to close that gap, and it's a legal obligation of the state. So the more we have to spend propping up the system, the less money to spend on actual classroom dollars and, hospitals and things like that. Assemblymember Tina McKinnon has been pushing this session legislation, AB 1383, that would allow newly hired police and firefighters to retire 2 years earlier at age 55. She would also lift the cap on how much California pensioners can earn in retirement, increasing it by almost $100,000 to match the federal limit of $280,000 a year. It would cost at more than $300 million a year, chipping away at the very modest bipartisan pension reforms that Governor Jerry Brown signed into law several years ago. Steve, I know you're chomping at the bit at this one. What's the deal with this now? And is Governor Newsom going to go along with this? Because he knows this is a mess.
I'll save that last one for last. Senate Bill 400, 1999, started the massive pension spiking, increasing frenzy that caused, partly caused the budget crisis in 2012 and caused the pension crisis in 2012. At the time, cities were facing even insolvency because of their pension systems. They're just consuming so much. We went to a 3% at 50 system for public safety. So it started out, everyone's for public safety, so they won't say no to police and firefighters. So it started with CHP, and it increased it from 2% to 3%. And then I remember some of the supporters saying, well, it's only increasing it by 1%. It's increasing it by 50% if you do the calculations. Anyway, CalPERS at the time said it won't cost taxpayers a dime.
Never will.
It didn't cost a dime. It cost tens of billions of dollars. Yes. So that $300 million is just a down payment. So, but here's the key thing: 2012, Jerry Brown did use his political capital to address the mounting pension liabilities with PEPRA, the Public Employees Pension Reform Act. And basically, it got rid of pension spiking, And then it reduced formulas for new hires. This is the key point. The only way we're going to fix this system is we can't do anything because of the California rule on the existing employees, where then that rule just says you can't reduce benefits that have been granted, even going forward, even starting tomorrow. We have to deal with it just by the attrition of the current workforce. We get new hires in, and then in 12 to 15 years, the system will be even keel. Now, it's 12 to 15 years later, 14 years later. Yeah. System isn't exactly on even keel. I think CalPERS is only funded at 79%.
Yeah.
But it's kind of
better than it was.
Better than it was. It's kind of on an even keel now, unless we have a recession, and then it's all bets are off. And now the police and fire unions want to go back to the old formulas and massively increase, and allowing localities to do it means they will do it. Yeah. So we're going to just undermine all of that 15 years of getting caught up again. And there's also a bill that would introduce a drop program. Both are going forward. Defined retirement option plan, which also lets them retire with a big lump sum in addition to their six-figure retire. And just look at Transparent California, filled with police and fire who have $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 total. Now that includes overtime, but massive pensions that they're going to get. And here's the thing: only one Republican voted against it. What good are Republicans? Carl DeMaio.
He's a big pension guy too.
Yeah, so. That was his thing. He was a big pension fighter. And I think on one of the other bills, there was one other Republican. But anyway, Republicans, they're not, where's John Morlock? Where are the people who were raising the red flags?
No profiles and courage here.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, and it's going to pass, and the governor's going to sign it, I would guess, because that's one group you don't want not in your corner, the public employee, and especially the
firefighters.
Police and firefighters. So yes, and my blood pressure is reducing.
Well, as we close, I think it's time for a chef's choice. And, we're following lots of bills each session, and some kind of take the cake for, bills that should be getting more attention but aren't. And I'll go first. So the one that really just popped up within the last few days, and this is a ridiculous bill in every way, and it's a measure, Assembly Bill 1608, that, we've had a lot of issues with high-speed rail. We've had a lot of issues with, there was a report that says they might go insolvent within the next, I think it was 18 months or so. And so we need to make sure that we have every bit of transparency. We're analyzing contracts, all the things, right, with high-speed rail. And this bill, one good thing, a few years ago, we put in place an inspector general in the high-speed rail office. And generally, that's money well spent. You have an independent watchdog keeping them honest. Well, Assembly Bill 1608 had kind of been sailing through the process. And now you have Governor Newsom is threatening to veto the bill, to take away some of these important tools that the independent watchdog needs to keep high-speed rail honest. And it sort of begs the question, why would we ever do that, right? Openness and accountability should be the cornerstone of government. And why are we doing it now, just as it's pretty clear major action is going to need to be taken with high-speed rail, probably from the legislature and the governor's office, to save it? You wonder, what's going on here? Is there fraud that we don't know about, that they're trying to hush up and sweep under the rug? Or is something about to happen that would rile up taxpayers? We'll never know if he vetoes the bill, and let's hope the governor does the right thing on this one. Matt, what are you watching that should be getting more attention?
Well, my bill to reintroduce the grizzly bears into California died.
Yes.
So that was my big one. Definitely am not looking for any grizzly bears next time I go to Tahoe. I admit that this is against every libertarian free market belief I have.
Yes.
I don't care. Sometimes, we got to be true to ourselves.
Yes.
Bills limiting social media usage for kids.
Uh-huh.
I love it. I don't think there's really any redeemable value for kids in social media, and I am more than happy to limit their usage. And I would rather than having to have that fight with my kids, I'd rather just not have it taken off the table. It's social harm, and you know.
Well, I think Steve Hilton put it best at the Politico conference last week, which we talked about. We're under-regulating things like protecting our kids, and we're over-regulating the creators and the people who are going to grow our economy and build, social media business empires here in the state. Steve, I know this is hard for you.
I disagree totally, but I think parents could have the tools to monitor. I mean, that's to me, as a free market person, that's such a fundamental issue is empowering parents to.
Well, I think on that note, I think let's adjourn somewhere and celebrate Steve's great op-ed and the thankful end of this year's legislative session. With that, we thank all of you for joining us for this week's episode of Next Round. And next week, we're going to take the week off. We're going to enjoy a little summer vacation. But join us back the first full week of September, and we'll have our take with, hopefully at that time, some signings and vetoes, and maybe some further developments with the governor's race and races like the insurance commissioner's race. So thanks again. We hope you'll join us next time for our look at politics and policy from a free market perspective here on Next Round.